Hi, my dear children. Today we are going to see a very important concept which is known as oogenesis, guys. So, here we'll be learning about a lot of details, right? So, I want everybody to concentrate so, guys, you can easily understand, all right? Along with oogenesis, we are also going to see about folliculogenesis. Folliculogenesis. So, I will explain everything in detail. Alright guys, so let us begin. So let me begin with the very basics, guys. Look at the reproductive system. Now you guys are very much well versed with the reproductive systems. If not, go back and see my old videos. Alright guys, so they have a pair of ovaries. I told you every month, right, the ovaries alternatively release one egg. For example, if this month the right ovary is releasing one egg into the fallopian tube, next month the left ovary will be releasing one egg, right? So this is what happens. Right. So now what kind of egg is released into the fallopian tube? We say that the mature egg. So now how is the egg maturing? But even before maturing, how did the egg form in the ovaries? Right? How did it form? So that formation of egg, ova, we call it egg, right? Formation of egg is known as oogenesis. Oo indicates the egg and genesis indicates formation, right? So this egg is, developing from an immature egg to a mature egg. For that it needs some nutrients and it needs some protection, right? So who's doing that? So there are certain supportive cells called follicular cells. They are doing that. So how are they forming? How are they forming in the ovaries? So, knowing about the formation of the follicles, that is known as folliculogenesis. Alright guys? Alright. So, now you guys know what is oogenesis and folliculogenesis. Oogenesis is formation of the egg cell. Folliculogenesis is the formation of follicle. Alright guys? And there is one important thing which you have to know. So guys, follicular cells and follicle both are different. Alright guys, very important. Most of the students will confuse this. Follicular cells are also known as granulosa cells, right? Yeah. So what is this follicular cells or granulosa cells? If suppose this is the egg, some cells will be surrounding the egg and providing nutrition to the egg. So these cells are known as, this is the egg guys, the blue part, and the surrounding cells are known as follicular cells or granulosa cells. Now what is a follicle? Follicle is both of these things, that is egg plus the follicular cells. Understanding guys? Egg plus follicular cells is known as a follicle. Is that clear? Is that clear? Whenever they say primordial follicle or primary follicle or secondary follicle, it means the egg along with the follicular cells. Understanding guys? Clear? So be clear with this, you will understand everything. Now shall we begin guys? Shall we begin? Right. Yeah. So before that I will give you one interesting aspect about ovary. So guys, I told you every month each ovary releases one egg, which means 12 eggs will be released. 12 eggs will be released in one complete year, right? Because we have 12 months, right? Every month one egg will be released. Imagine guys, they are removing one ovary from the female reproductive system because there is a tumor in the ovary, say a cancerous condition. So one particular ovary is removed. Now what do you think guys? Do you think only 6 eggs will be produced a year? No, wrong. Even when one ovary is removed, the system accommodates itself, it adapts itself to the changing environment, and even if one ovary is released, even if one ovary is removed, 12 eggs will be released per year. How? The one ovary itself will release one egg every month. Understanding guys? And guys, do you remember I told you when we learned about the male reproductive system, orchido means testis. I told you. Do you guys remember it? Orchidectomy is removal of testis. I told you, no guys. Orchidectomy. Yes. Likewise, the name for the medical terminology for ovaries is oophoро. So oophorectomy is nothing but the removal of ovaries. If they are removing only one ovary because of a tumorous condition, you call it unilateral oophorectomy. Unilateral oophorectomy. If they are removing both the ovaries because of tumorous condition, then it is known as bilateral oophorectomy. So guys, oophoro means ovaries, orchido means testis. Alright guys, orchidectomy is a surgical removal of testis, oophorectomy is surgical removal of ovaries. Alright, with that beautiful information, let us begin the session. Alright guys, so as I already told you, we are going to see oogenesis and folliculogenesis. But before that guys, I am taking some time to explain you some important concepts so that you can easily understand oogenesis. Alright guys, look at this one ovary. There is a beautiful cross section of one particular ovary. So look at that guys. You can see something called primordial follicles. Follicles mean guys egg along with the follicular cells. See, then it is developing into primary follicle. Primary follicle is developing into secondary follicles, secondary into tertiary follicle, and completely matured follicle we call that as Graphene follicle. What is it guys? Graphene follicle. So guys, there is this process called ovulation which exactly happens at the 14th day of the menstrual cycle. Right? Not exactly 14th day, it varies from women to women, 13, 14 or 15, plus 2 or minus 2. But ovulation generally we refer it to the 14th day. Alright, where the mature egg bursts open a follicle and get released into the oviduct. That follicle is known as the Graphene follicle. The mature egg breaks open from a follicle. That mature follicle is known as Graphene follicle. Alright guys, yeah. So where does this development happen? How are the eggs are coming into the ovaries first of all, right? So in order to understand that, let us start learning about the oogenesis first. Alright children, yeah. Now we are going to learn oogenesis. Then I will teach you folliculogenesis. So guys, but you have to learn both of these things simultaneously, only then you can understand. Alright, now concentrate guys. What is oogenesis? Formation of egg. Before that you have to know how eggs are formed, right? Where are they coming from, right? So guys, when a baby is forming in the uterus, right, there will be something called as a yolk sac. If this is the baby, developing baby, it will be attached to a yolk sac like this. Okay, this yolk sac will provide all the necessary cells because it has a pool of stem cells, right? From that, something called as primordial germ cells from which the egg arises, right? That will be supplied into the ovary of the developing fetus. So where does it occurring guys? During intra-embryonic life, which means when the baby is developing inside the mother's womb. Understanding guys? Understanding? Yeah. So now, even before birth, all this is happening. If you ask me exactly when this is happening, so guys, from 4th week to 5th week of pregnancy itself, the ovaries start to form, right? The gonads basically. In male child, testes will start to form, and in female child, ovaries will start to form. And by the end of 11th to 12th week, if you see, they will be fully developed. They will be fully developed, and inside the fully developed ovaries, this oogenesis and folliculogenesis will be happening. So that is why we say it happens during the intra-embryonic life. That is in the embryo which is developing inside the womb of the mother. Understanding guys? Understood all the details now? Right. Now, so this basics you have to know, right? Now the primordial germ cell is going into the ovary, and from there they are starting to develop. Now, so let us see this guys. Hope you guys understood this part. Now let me erase this off. Alright guys, so if you take the oogenesis, there are 3 steps, okay? So first we call it the multiplication phase, then the growth phase, then the maturation phase. Alright guys, so these are the three phases. Clear? Right. Now let me explain you one by one. So guys, it starts with the primordial germ cell, which is the basic cell, right? So imagine this is the primordial germ cell now. Alright. So this primordial germ cell is there in the ovary, right? So now the very first is the multiplication phase. So what happens during that time? So this primordial germ cell will undergo mitosis, and it will form oogonia. Oogonia is the mother cell for the ova. Alright. Now after this what happened? The second phase is the growth phase. Right. This oogonia grows and gets differentiated to form the primary oocyte. It forms the, let me write a 1 here. So it forms the primary oocyte. Alright guys. Now, so clear till this? Multiplication phase, growth phase. So now when does this occur? All this occur before birth. Before birth, all this will happen. That is, both the ovaries will be having the primary oocyte. Right. Now what happens after this? You know, once the primary oocyte is formed inside the embryo, it starts undergoing meiotic division. So it undergoes meiosis 1, but it gets arrested. It gets arrested in prophase 1. There is a stage called prophase 1 in meiosis 1, and most particularly under prophase 1 there is a phase called diplotin. So meiotic 1, under which it has prophase 1 and under which it has diplotin stage. At that stage it gets arrested, right? So this primary oocyte, which is arrested during first meiosis during prophase 1, will be there in the baby's embryo. Understanding guys? Right? Now, what happens during the childhood period? That is from birth till 12 years. So usually we say that the girls attain puberty. Puberty means attaining sexual maturity, that is ability to reproduce. That puberty is attained during 12 years of age. It differs from 11 to 13 years, or it differs, but this is the normal age. Alright guys, when this happens, right, when this happens, you know, we say they attain the sexual maturity. Alright, yes. So until this phase, that is from birth till puberty, we call it childhood period. What is the period called? Childhood. So at that period, if you ask me, ma'am, what change will happen to the egg? No change. Till birth, I mean before birth, ovaries are having primary oocyte, it will still remain there. In the childhood period, the ovaries will be inactive. Ovaries will be inactive. Why guys? Because there are no hormones. The brain is not releasing the enough hormones, right? There is no induction of hormones. That is why the egg remains as such and there will be no change in the ovary. But what happens after puberty? That is, once they attain the sexual maturity. First of all, what is puberty guys? When the induction of the sex hormones come into the play, right? Yes. So especially two hormones released by the pituitary gland. We say it is FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and LH, luteinizing hormone. When these hormones come into the play, what happens? The ovary gets activated and the egg will continue its division, right? So after puberty, this primary oocyte, no guys, that will complete its meiotic division, completes it meiotic division. And what happens further guys? I am continuing it this side, right? I am continuing it this side. Okay, right? After this, it completes meiosis 1. So this primary oocyte will divide into the secondary oocyte and one polar body will form. One tiny polar body. If you ask me, ma'am, what is polar body? It's nothing but, guys, when the primary oocyte divide, right? When it divides, one egg will take up a lot of cytoplasmic region. That will become the secondary oocyte, and the part which took very small portions of the cytoplasm becomes the polar body. If you ask me, ma'am, what is the fate of the polar body? Is there any function? No, they are non-functional. They will disintegrate. All right. Yes. Now this secondary oocyte is there. It will start the meiotic 2, meiosis 2 it will start. But you know what happens here, guys? Again it will get arrested in metaphase 2 stage. Meiosis 2, metaphase 2 of meiosis 2. Right? At that particular phase it gets arrested. Understanding? Right. Now, when will it get released? When will it get released? Right. So this secondary oocyte, guys, is what is opening the Graphene follicle and get released during ovulation. Which means you should not say that ovum is getting released into the fallopian tube. That is a very wrong statement. Secondary oocyte is what is getting released into the fallopian tube. Alright, guys. Secondary oocyte. You can call secondary oocyte as a mature egg cell, because there is only one more. It has to just complete the meiosis 2. That's it. So that secondary oocyte is released during ovulation to the fallopian tube. If you ask me, ma'am, when will it complete the meiosis 2? Guys, only when fertilization happens, the egg will complete its meiosis. That's fascinating, no, guys? Only when the sperm enters the secondary oocyte. So let us take the secondary oocyte, which is arrested in metaphase 2 of meiosis 2. Only when it encounters the sperm, it will complete the meiosis 2. Why is that? Because the sperm has the necessary material. So guys, if you go back to the sperm video, the structure of the sperm video which I have given, there is this centriole called proximal centriole in the neck region of the sperm. That centriole is an organelle needed for cell division, no, guys. Only when that centriole is supplied to the ovum, not the ovum, the secondary oocyte, it will transform into ovum. That is, it will complete its meiosis. Understanding, guys? Yeah. So when it completes the meiosis again, what will form, guys? What will form? Yes, guys, yes. Right. Did you understand? Only then what will form, guys? What will form from the secondary oocyte? It will form the ovum. It will form the ovum. And what about the next one? It forms a tiny polar body, which is the second polar body. Right? That's all. That's all. Understood, guys? Understood? So this is what happens. If you ask me what happens to this polar body, I already told you it will disintegrate. If it is not disintegrating and still staying, it will also undergo meiosis 2 and it will form two other polar bodies. But what happens to them? They will also disintegrate, right? Polar bodies are non-functional, so they will disintegrate as such. Understanding, guys? Understanding my point? Polar body, the first polar body will not usually undergo meiosis 2. But if it is undergoing meiosis 2, it will again form two other polar bodies. It will complete meiosis 2 and form two other polar bodies which will also get disintegrated. And the secondary oocyte which was arrested in the metaphase 2 of meiosis 2, when it encounters the sperm will contribute the proximal centriole and it will complete its meiosis 2 and ovum is formed and you have the second polar body also. Alright, guys? Alright. So this ovum, right, this ovum we can also call it as ooted. It is nothing but the zygote because the sperm has fused with it, right? Yes. So that forms the zygote. The ovum later becomes, when the nucleus of the sperm and the nucleus of the egg fuses, it becomes the zygote. Alright guys. Yeah. So far when the sperm attaches, first it contributes the centriole. The egg will complete its meiosis too and become ovum. Only then the nucleus of the ovum and the nucleus of the sperm will fuse and they become the zygote. Understanding guys? Which means the secondary oocyte needs a sperm to complete its cell division, to complete the meiosis and turn into ovum. That's so fascinating, no guys? Yeah, but that is not the case of sperm guys. Sperm has already completed its meiosis. Meiosis 1, meiosis 2, everything is completed when they are in the testis itself and only then they will be released. But in case of egg, that is not the case. Even after ovulation, they haven't completed their meiosis. Understanding guys, right? So quickly let me tell you. So it starts with a primordial germ cell. It undergoes mitosis. Then the second phase, it undergoes mitosis and form oogonia. Oogonia, it grows and it differentiates to form the primary oocyte. So this multiplication growth phase, where primary oocyte is formed and it is arrested in mitotic 1, that is prophase 1 diplotin stage of meiosis 1, right? So until this it happens before birth, and during childhood no change, ovaries are inactive. Only after puberty the hormones, follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone comes into the play and the division resumes. So which means the complete maturation phase, this phase is known as the maturation, the last phase, that happens only after puberty. Alright guys, where the primary oocyte is completing its meiosis 1 and becoming secondary oocyte and one polar body. That polar body will disintegrate and this secondary oocyte will get arrested in the meiosis 2, that is metaphase 2 of meiosis 2. And only when the secondary oocyte is ovulated, that is when it break opens the Graphene follicle and it is released into the fallopian tube, it waits in the ampulla region, right? Last video I would have explained that. It waits in the ampulla region. When it meets the sperm, it will complete its meiosis 2, right, and become the ovum, and second polar body will also be formed. Alright guys, what happens to all the polar bodies? What is the ultimate result guys? From one cell, 4 cells are produced. Among those 4 cells, 3 are polar bodies and only 1 is the ovum. Getting it guys? Yes, getting it? Yeah. And if you see the diploid haploid nature, the primordial germ cell is diploid, oogonia is diploid, and the oocyte, primary oocyte is also diploid. Right, and after this they become haploid, right? After this they become, once it completes the meiosis 1, they become haploid, and of course meiosis 2 also they are haploid, right? Understanding guys? That's all we have completed. Done. Now shall we see about the folliculogenesis guys? Ready for it? Yes. So let us begin now. Alright children, hope oogenesis is clear, right? So simultaneously I will teach you the folliculogenesis now. Follow me. Alright children, right? I will use a different color now. Yes. Folliculogenesis. Already in the very beginning I told you follicle means egg cell plus the surrounding follicular cells. If this is the egg cell, the surrounding follicular cells, together you call it the follicle. So if you see till birth, right, that is before birth completely, there is one follicle which is present, which is known as primordial follicle. Okay, so that primordial follicle is nothing but few layers of the granulosa cells. So follicular cells are also known as granulosa cells, right? Right, so very little follicular cells will be surrounding the egg. So this particular follicle we call it primordial follicle, right? This follicle will be supplying the nutrients to the egg, and also it will be protecting the egg. Alright guys, so this is what it is doing. Primordial follicle is done now. Now let us see what happens after birth, after the birth and after puberty also. Right? If you see after puberty, the oocyte, the primary oocyte which was arrested in meiosis 1, prophase 1, diplotin stage will complete its meiosis 1 and form secondary oocyte. You know what happens during this phase? A lot of changes in the follicular cells will happen. We will see that. What are the series of changes happening in them? Right? At that time, at that phase, this primordial will change into primary, secondary and tertiary follicle. Now first we will see about the primary follicle. Now what is primary follicle? Primary follicle, where you can see some development in the follicular cells. So egg cell is there. Which egg cell is there? Primary oocyte is there. Primary oocyte is there in the first follicle. Right? In the primary follicle, if you see, primary oocyte is in the center, which is surrounded by the granulosa cells. But what is the change here, guys? There will be a small layer which is surrounding that. Alright. You can see a small layer surrounding that egg cell, and that will be surrounded by one complete layer of the follicular cells. Can you see the difference between primordial follicle and this, guys? Can you see the growth there? Yeah. Now what is this gap between the granulosa cells and the egg? Can you see this? This layer, we call it the zona pellucida. What is this zona pellucida, guys? Who forms this? The granulosa cells surrounding the primary oocyte, that will form this layer. What is this? It's nothing but rich with glycoproteins. Glycoprotein. So it's a gel-like layer, right? It will be like a gel, rich with glycoproteins, right? Yes. Yeah. So that is surrounding the primary oocyte, and that is surrounded by the granulosa cells. One complete layer of granulosa cells. Understood, guys? The primary follicle? Understood? Now, this secondary follicle. Yes. Now, let me tell you this. What happens to this secondary follicle? If you take this secondary follicle, no, guys. All these changes happen where, guys? When the egg is transforming to this secondary oocyte, right? Secondary oocyte. At that time itself, all of this will happen, because secondary oocyte ruptures the Graphene follicle, which means primordial follicle which was there during birth is converted into primary, secondary, tertiary and mature Graphene follicle. All these stages will happen quickly. Alright, guys. If you say ovulation, it happens on 14th day of the menstrual cycle. This secondary follicle will form in the 12th day. 13th day, tertiary follicle. 14th day, Graphene follicle will be there. Understanding, guys? This is how it happens. Right. So 12 represents the 12th day of the menstrual cycle. Now, how does this secondary follicle looks like? I already told you there is this egg cell which is surrounded by zona pellucida, that is surrounded by granulosa. And here, guys, what is the major change here? Like this one layer of granulosa cells, there will be 6 to 8 layers of granulosa cells like this. Okay. So that much development will happen, and surrounding that a layer will form. Right. That layer is what is known as thecal layer. Thecal layer forms in the secondary follicle. What is this thecal layer now? More specifically, we call that as theca interna. Theca interna. Right? Now, what is this layer doing? This developing follicle, this follicular cell is what produces the estrogen. It secretes the estrogen. And one more important thing, guys, it has the receptor. Receptor means structures like this. structures, proteinaceous structures like this for follicle stimulating hormone to come and bind like this. Okay, that follicle stimulating hormone receptor will be present in the theca interna. So that is the structure where the follicle stimulating hormone comes and binds and brings about the further growth. Understanding, guys? And that is what is enabling the theca interna to secrete estrogen as well. Right? Understood? Very, very important, guys. So all these changes happen in the secondary follicle. Now what happens thereafter? So slowly the next day it will turn into the tertiary follicle. So during that phase what happens is that, see, tertiary follicle, what are the changes happening to the thing? One more layer forms which is known as theca externa. I will draw that. See, so from the middle we will start. You have an egg cell surrounded by zona pellucida, right now, guys. Surrounding that you have many layers of granulosa cells, that is 6 to 8 layers like that. I am just drawing 2 layers because I do not want to make it look so clumsy. After this what happens? You have theca interna, that will be surrounded by another layer called as theca externa. What is this layer, guys? It is known as the theca externa, right? So 2 layers are there. Theca interna is surrounded by theca externa. So guys, when this happens, you know what will be formed there in the granulosa cells? As 2 layers are covering them and the complete follicle is enlarging as well, right? The complete follicle is enlarging now, no, guys. So what happens at that time is that, I will tell you, see, I will draw it again separately. Listen, guys, so this is the egg cell surrounded by zona pellucida and then the granulosa layer, right now, guys. There will be some cavities which are forming in the granulosa cell like that. See, there will be some gaps like this. I'll tell you what are those cavities. I'll just highlight it with a different color. Some cavities like this. Alright. I'll tell you what are those cavities known. Right. So that will be surrounded by theca interna and theca externa. So this tertiary follicle is what I am drawing now. Alright, guys. Inside you have the secondary oocyte now. Alright, secondary oocyte is there. Now guys, if you look at this picture, you can see some cavities in the granulosa region, right? Now those cavities are known as antrum. Antrum is a fluid filled cavity. There is some fluid inside these cavities, right? So what is that fluid known as? That fluid is known as liquor folliculi. Liquor folliculi. Alright, guys. Yes, just make a note of it. That fluid name is known as liquor folliculi. So this fluid filled cavity is known as antrum. That is why sometimes you can also refer this tertiary follicle as antral follicle also. Alright. This one only I have drawn it because I didn't mention the cavities here. Right. Yeah. So this is how it looks exactly. Alright, guys. Understanding? Yeah. So exactly at the third follicle is where if you see the oogenesis, the primary oocyte would have completed the meiotic division and it would have given rise to the secondary oocyte. That is why I have given secondary oocyte here. Understanding, guys? But if you see the secondary follicle, inside that it has the primary oocyte. Only in the tertiary follicle, it would have completed the meiosis 1 and it would have turned into the secondary oocyte. Alright. So that is surrounded by granulosa, antrum cavity in between, and then theca interna and theca externa. Done with this, guys, the tertiary follicle. Now finally the 14th day, right? Next, the formation of the Graphene follicle. So the Graphene follicle, it is the complete mature follicle. Alright, guys? Yeah, so inside you have the secondary oocyte, right? That is surrounded by the zona pellucida. And if you see the granulosa cells, no, they will arrange themselves like this. You can see some layer attached to the zona pellucida like this. Alright. And then there will be all these cavities will combine together to form one complete large cavity like this. That is known as the antrum. Right, this complete portion is antrum. Alright, guys. Then you will be having the theca externa. Theca interna and theca externa. Alright, guys. Theca interna and theca externa. Right. So this is how the complete egg cell looks like. Alright, guys. And if you see this region alone will be attached to the theca interna. Understanding, guys? Now look at the egg cell now. So what from the middle if we start, you have the ovum there, that is you should not call it ovum, you have the secondary oocyte, mature secondary oocyte followed by the zona pellucida. And guys, can you see this layer which is surrounding granulosa cells surrounding them? That layer we call it the corona radiata. Alright, and that is surrounded by the antrum, right, and that is surrounded by the theca interna and externa. And you can see certain granulosa cells are attached to the theca internal layer. So this bridge of cells we call them the cumulus oophorus. Alright, guys, this bridge of cells. So this is exactly where the sperm puts its head, right? So this is the portion where the sperm puts its head and it will penetrate inside. Alright? Yeah. So this is the cumulus oophorus. Only this particular region will you will see this bridge of cells attaching to the theca interna. Alright, guys? Understanding? Yes. Yeah, and even surrounding the antrum you can also find some granulosa region like this. Alright, guys. The one which is attached to the egg completely is what is known as the corona radiata, and all other these cells we just call them the granulosa cells. And this bridge formed here is known as cumulus oophorus. Alright, guys, see how look at the journey of the follicle, guys, that is the egg along with that. So it started with something like this, and then you can see the primary follicle with the zona pellucida and one layer of granulosa cells. Then the secondary follicle where still you have the primary oocyte inside surrounded by zona pellucida, 6 to 8 layers of granulosa cells covered by the theca interna which secretes estrogen and has the FSH receptor. And then the tertiary follicle where the oocyte would have completed meiosis 1 and have turned into secondary oocyte, that is surrounded by zona pellucida, the granulosa cells, and inside the granulosa cells. So guys, it won't be like this, it will be properly in layers, the granulosa cells, but I have drawn it like that, and you can see the cavities here and there. Alright, guys, and then you can see the theca interna and theca externa, and antrum fluid filled cavity, and the fluid is known as liquor folliculi. Later you guys will come to know what is this function of the liquor folliculi and all when we learn about the gastrulation and all, so do not worry about that. And then Yeah, finally if you look at the Graphene follicle, this is how it will be exactly, right? So this Graphene follicle will be ruptured and then the oocyte will come out, that is the secondary oocyte will come out and it will go and wait in the, see if this is the ovary, this is the Graphene follicle, it is having the secondary oocyte that will be released out and the secondary follicle will be waiting in the ampullary region of the fallopian tube. Alright guys, and once it receives the sperm, that will turn into ovum, because sperm is what is having the proximal centriole which is needed by the secondary oocyte to complete the meiosis II, because it is arrested, right? Because here the meiosis II is arrested in the metaphase II stage. So that will resume and it will complete the meiosis II only when the sperm is encountered. Alright guys, or if fertilization is not happening, what will happen? That's all, the secondary oocyte will regenerate or it will be reabsorbed by the body. That's all. That's all guys, understood? Yeah, yes. And just like the fate of your polar bodies, if you ask me what exactly happens to them, they will be phagocytized by the WBZs. It will disintegrate basically, that's all. Alright guys, so that's about the oogenesis and folliculogenesis. Hope you guys enjoyed, but now I will show you a beautiful picture, because I think I troubled you with a lot of clumsy diagrams like this. Right, now I will show you this picture and you will understand it completely. Hi guys, yes, so now let me quickly complete the follicles, right? The folliculogenesis, I'll quickly give a summary and then I will show you a beautiful slide. Alright guys, look at this, look at the primordial follicle. You just have few granulosa cells surrounding the ovum, right? Ovum is surrounded with the granulosa cells, that is the follicular cells. So this too is what is known as the follicle, right? Then look at the primary follicle guys. So primordial follicle until birth, after birth, that is after puberty, if you see, they start growing. So primary follicle, if you see, you can see a layer surrounding the egg which is known as zona pellucida, which is covered by one complete layer of the granulosa cells. Granulosa or follicular, both means the same. Then you can see the egg cell, right, that is surrounded by the zona pellucida, that is surrounded by 6 to 8 layers of granulosa, and theca interna occurs, theca interna, which produces the estrogen and has the receptors for FSH. Alright guys, then look at the next layer, then look at the next thing. You can see the theca interna is surrounded by one other layer, right? No guys, can you see 2 layers there? Yeah, so the egg cell, zona pellucida, many layers of granulosa, theca interna surrounded by the theca externa. Alright guys, yeah, yes, and you can see these cavities there, right? So only a small cavity is shown, but usually little more also will be there. Here in this picture you can see one small cavity there. That is what is known as the antrum. That is why we also call this as, that is early tertiary follicle, right? So we also call it as antrum, we also call it as antral follicle, right? So that is a fluid filled cavity, right? And the fluid is known as liquor folliculi. Finally, all these cavities will join together and form a big crescent shaped cavity. That is what is the antrum. And you guys can evidently see that the egg is surrounded by the zona pellucida, that is surrounded by tiny little layers of cells which is known as corona radiata. Then you have the antrum, right? And there is a bridge of cells which is getting connected to the granulosa layer, right? That is known as the cumulus oophorus, right? And then you have the theca interna and then the theca externa. So this is your complete mature Graphene follicle. Understood? Hope you guys got it. So beautiful, no guys? Look at what are the things happening inside the ovary, right? Yes. Now look at this picture. Everything will be clear. Now come on, let us learn both of the things simultaneously, the oogenesis and the follicular development. Alright guys, so before birth if you see, here in case of oogenesis, the primary germ cell is converted into oogonia by mitosis. Multiplication phase is completed. Then this oogonia undergoes growth and development, differentiation to form the primary oocyte. Right? So growth phase is also done. Simultaneously see the follicular development here, primordial follicle is there. Right? Primordial follicle, few granulosa layers are surrounded. Now look at what happens during childhood. Ovary is inactive, no changes because no induction of hormones. But once after puberty, that is till menopause. What is menopause, guys? That is stoppage, right? Permanent stoppage, cessation of the menstrual cycle during 45 to 50 years of age, right? Until that period, from puberty till menopause, if you see, all this happens every month. So which means every menstrual cycle, right? During each menstrual cycle, only one primordial follicle will get converted into mature Graphene follicle and ovulation will happen. That is why I said only one egg will be released every month. Alright. Now see, this primary follicle at the time of, before birth was arrested in the prophase 1 stage of meiosis 1, especially diplotin stage. Diplotin of prophase 1. Right. Now after puberty, that will resume and it will complete its meiosis 1. When it completes its meiosis 1, it forms the secondary oocyte. Right. See, once it is completed, it forms the secondary oocyte. Look at the follicular growth during that period. See, it has converted from primordial to primary follicle to the secondary tertiary follicle, growing follicle they mean, the secondary and then the tertiary, and finally the Graphene. Graphene follicle is also known as vesicular follicle. Alright, see, you can see the crescent shaped antrum there, no guys, look at this. So if you see a crescent shaped antrum, it means it's a Graphene follicle, complete mature follicle. Alright guys, see, right, see, and what is inside that? Secondary oocyte. Alright guys, and that is what is getting released during ovulation. The egg will rupture, it will rupture the Graphene follicle and it will be released. Alright guys, yeah. Then what happens after ovulation? It will be waiting in the ampullary region of the fallopian tube for 24 hours. Within the 24 hours, if it encounters the sperm will be carrying the centriole for meiotic 2 completion. Till then what happens? What is happening guys? Once secondary follicle is formed, it will undergo meiosis 2. But again it will get arrested in metaphase 2. When will it get released? Only when it meets a sperm. If not, in the same state it will disintegrate. Right? Yeah. So if it encounters the sperm during that phase, this arrested phase will get released and meiosis 2 will be completed and ovum will be formed. Alright guys? Right. Now see, this is the first polar body and this is the second polar body. And look at this guys, meiosis 2 of first polar body may or may not occur. If it occurs, it will again form 2 polar bodies only, primitive polar bodies, right? Here the secondary oocyte will undergo division and it forms 1 polar body and 1 ovum. So finally at the end of oogenesis, it starts with a diploid primary oocyte and it ends with 4 cells. What are they? 3 polar bodies and 1 ovum. That's all. That's all. All these 3 will disintegrate or degenerate. That's all. By phagocytosis by WBCs. Only ovum will be there. Right guys, and when should you use the word ovum? Only after fertilization, right? Till then it is just secondary oocyte. Alright guys, that's all. Simultaneously we completed it. Very easy and interesting, no guys? So you have to keep all these things in your mind, right? What happens before birth, what happens during childhood, what happens after puberty, right? Yes. Now I am going to give you a series of questions guys, which is very important to test whether you guys have understood the concept or not. Yeah, now see, I have one question for you. Right. So guys, you know what is ovulation now? So if they ask you the definition of ovulation, what you will say? Ovulation is nothing but the process by which secondary oocyte is released. Secondary oocyte is released into the fallopian tube by rupturing the Graphene follicle. So you should not call it the ovum. Now you understood why it is known as secondary oocyte? Right. So by rupturing the Graphene follicle. Right. Now second one. Which is the site of fertilization? If they ask you this, what is the answer, guys? After ovulation, the egg waits in the ampulla region of the fallopian tube. Fallopian tube is also known as oviduct or uterine tube, all means the same. And one important question, guys. So, is the first polar body released every month? Released every month. What do you think, guys? What do you think? Let us go back to the slide and see. This one they are asking. What do you think, guys? When the first polar body is forming, simultaneously you have the secondary oocyte which is formed, where meiosis 1 is completed and secondary oocyte is formed. Which means yes, a very big yes. Every month it will be formed. But it disintegrates. But if they ask you one other question, here it is yes. But if they ask you, is second polar body released every month, what is your answer, guys? Answer is no, because only when... Why is it a big no, guys? Why is it a big no? Because the second polar body is formed only when the secondary oocyte completes its meiosis 2. Right, because now it is arrested, right? Once it is ovulated, it is arrested in metaphase 2 of meiosis 2. It will get released only when it encounters the sperm, because the sperm will contribute the proximal centriole and meiosis 2 will complete, and only then the second polar body will be formed, right? Only when secondary oocyte completes the meiosis 2, the second polar body and the ovum will be formed, right? So, which means only when fertilization happens, second polar body will be formed. If not, if they ask you, is second polar body released every month? The answer is a big no, right? Yes. So, these are some of the important questions, guys. So, if you guys have understood the complete concept, you can easily answer all of these questions, or even if they are asking very difficult questions. Alright, guys. Hope you enjoyed the session. We'll catch up with you with another interesting topic in the next session, and you can also put it in the comment box. So watch the video fully, guys, for complete understanding. Alright, hope you guys enjoy the sessions. Bye bye, take care.